president for Run for Something. She has authored 2 books, Run for Something, and her new book, When You're in Charge, The Next Generation's Guide to Leadership, is really an awesome way for us to discuss what we need now in this moment with the Trump administration coming back into power and how we're going to fight back.
I'm originally from Virginia, born and raised. I went to Northwestern for college to study American Studies with a focus on gender and politics. My first job when I was a senior was working for President Obama's re-election campaign. I was doing online fundraising and volunteer recruitment, that kind of thing. We won. Love to win. I stayed in Chicago and worked for the president's nonprofit for about a year. Moved down to Florida to work on the governor's race in 2014. We lost, but I got to go to Disney World, so that was okay. Not really, but it's Disney World. Then I moved to New York and started working for Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign in 2015. I was her email director, so online fundraising, volunteer recruitment, really building a grassroots movement of people supporting her. We lost. That was sad. About a week after Election Day, I started hearing from people I'd gone to high school and college with. Hey, Amanda, I'm a public school teacher in Chicago. I'm thinking about running for office because if Trump can be president, it seems like anybody can do this. What do I do? I didn't have an answer for them because at the time, if you were young, if you were newly excited about politics and you wanted to do more than vote and more than volunteer, there was nowhere you could go that would answer your call. So I reached out to a whole bunch of people with an idea. What if we started an organization to solve this problem? One of them became my co-founder, Ross Morales-Ricchetto. We wrote a plan, we built a website, and then we launched Run for Something on Trump's first inauguration day, thinking, what a fun side project this will be. I will get a real job. He was managing a congressional campaign at the time. We thought we'd get 100 people who signed up in the first year. We had 1,000 people in the first week. As of today, we're up to nearly 250,000 young people across the country who've raised their hands to say they want to run. We've endorsed more than 3,000 campaigns, helped elect more than 1,500 millennials and Gen Z to local offices all across the country, mostly women and people of color.
So when you say you saw a problem, for the audience, let's dive into what problem you're solving, because that's really the nuts and bolts of the birth of Run for Something, and then we'll get When We're in Charge, your next amazing book. So let's start there.
So the problem in 2017 was that there was not an entry point for young people, and candidate recruitment was an afterthought. There was a lot of work being spent on TV ads and starting to do stuff on digital ads and field work, but nobody was really tackling this idea of who the candidate is and how they tell their story, what their story is to begin with, in any kind of systematic or scalable way. Candidate recruitment, basically through the 90s and into the 2000s, was done by a mix of incumbents, picking their successors. Sometimes state parties would do it. Unions would find leaders to run. But it was very behind the scenes. It was very hush-hush. And it was gatekeepers. It was all gatekeepers. And they would try and box people out if they didn't want you to run. I wanted to blow that up. And I wanted to make it so that if you were someone inspired by this moment and you wanted to actually get in the game yourself, you could do so. So we decided to really democratize access to the information you need in order to get your name on the ballot.
And how do you intentionally keep that going in a way that makes sure it stays by the people and not turning Run for Something into a new gatekeeper? How do you keep that intentionally so that everyone has the opportunity and it's not just a new group of people saying who can run and who can't?
Such a thoughtful question, because it's something we really wrestle with. I view us as a role, we never say, no, you shouldn't run. We say, are you running for the right thing at the right time, or for the right reasons? We really try and take people through a series of questions and self-exploration to make sure that they're doing it and know how hard it's going to be and are doing it anyway. So we really start with folks what is the problem you care about solving? What is the office that would give you power to solve it? And why should voters want you to win? Not why do you want to win? You want to win because winning is great and losing sucks. Why should voters want you to win? What are you going to do for them? And we really push people what are your ties to your community? What makes you reflective of the place you are running? Why should people trust you? Do you have a really good and clear understanding of the things they care about? And are you ready to do the work to learn and to listen? when you start to really hammer it home and break in the details of what it means to run for office, sometimes you just winnow people out automatically who aren't ready to do the work. But we also endorse people running against each other. We do double endorsements in races all the time because our perspective is that our role is not to pick and choose the winners. It's to empower as many candidates as possible to run strong campaigns so that the voters can decide. And I think that can be a little bit controversial in the political space, and sometimes I get blowback for it, but I think it is the most respectful way to engage in the democratic process.
I think that is 100% on point because we're experiencing that here in Indiana. Because you're flipping the script to decide, to let the voters decide, because that's who deciding, that's your mission. Mm-hmm. And secondly, what we're forgetting the number one reason for democracy is voter participation. And if you give them multiple choices, you're going to see voter turnout increase. Mm-hmm. Challenges are good. They can make you look at things differently, reconnect with your voters. So I think it's a healthy part of democracy that we're forgetting that this is how it's supposed to work, that Joe couldn't run on the Kennedy name. The young voters were like, what's that Kennedy legacy? That doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I want substance.
Mm-hmm. I think that's exactly right. And I think, I've heard from members of Congress, you can tell who of your colleagues or who of their colleagues have faced a recent competitive election and who hasn't, because there's someone who's had to talk to voters recently. There's someone who's had to be in touch with folks. It is so different from like the people who are just like removed from the campaign process.
Yeah. Talk to us about, let's go back to Hillary's campaign. It's fast, it's quick. What were the things that really, I'm sure there was problems you wanted to see solved, but I think the listeners need to really understand, having worked on campaign, of how fast, quick, 12-hour work days, it's long, there's a lot of demands. Talk about, which starts you into thinking, I'm sure, about your next book. What's going on in terms of who's mentoring you, who's helping you, who's guiding you? How are you're thrown into this position. Fundraising, digital fundraising is a really important part of the campaign ecosystem. You're at a young age, I'm thinking, you're put into this responsible position. So talk to me about everything that's going on in your head and all around you in this space.
I was 24, 25 when we started on the campaign. Wow. I was eventually managing a team of about 30, sort of fluctuated a little bit towards the end there. It was my first time managing a team that big, management training, because they don't do that on campaigns. And I don't know if I was in over my head so much as it was trial by fire. And I just had to keep fighting flames, putting the flames out every day. I was really lucky that I hired great people. My team was really excellent. It was really important to me that the work would be hard, but we didn't have to be miserable doing it. That's always been one of my sort of core mantras. So what could we do to make it joyful? What could we do to make it a good team experience? How could we keep the vibes good, even if it was going to be really, really hard? Because we did. We worked 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. basically every day. Was it always the most effective? No, but sometimes that's sort of how the cookie crumbled. I tried really, really hard as well to build a diverse and equitable and inclusive team environment. My team was very diverse. It's true in every team I've ever hired for. It's important to me to build teams of people who come from different backgrounds. It's how you get better outcomes. And that also is challenging because you have people from different backgrounds who communicate different ways and think about things differently, and you have to be really intentional about creating a space where that is productive and not destructive. So yeah, I definitely learned a lot through that experience sort of as a professional, and feel very lucky because it was such a privilege to do that work. Such a privilege.
Absolutely. I think you hit on the head because when I had the fortunate of working for Lululemon for almost 9 years, and in that space, we were, part of our pillars was leadership development. People always wondered, why does Lululemon keep their teams for so long? And it has to do with, you have to go through this practice of leadership, leading self, leading others, leading organization. And when I started working in this space, I was like, we're not setting our people up for success. And I'll tell you a story, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So when I was working with the campaign, the candidate hired a campaign manager from Pennsylvania. Josh is sitting here in Pennsylvania. Glowing reviews, did a lot of work out in the field, was ready to level up, was ready for the next leadership position. And when the gentleman arrived, the candidate called and says, hey, it was St. Patrick's Day weekend, we want to create a warm, welcoming environment, invited a bunch of us to go out to onboard them socially, whatnot. And 2 or 3 weeks in, it became quite apparent this young gentleman wasn't ready for the next position. And the candidate who works in leadership development was beside herself because she didn't want to let him go, but we all know how fast campaigns move. He just wasn't ready. It broke her heart because she had to let him go. Here he was, he moved here, ready to, dive in. Do you hear these stories over and over again? Because to me, that's on us. That's on us as an organization. We failed this young gentleman. But at the same time, you've got the challenge of a candidate who's moving really fast and is like, how do I have time to train, develop, and give this person an opportunity? Because I know that in my world, where I came from Lululemon, you always had to be training your replacement. And we don't do that.
There's just not the same kind of culture inside politics. There is a certain amount of mentorship and like you've been in the foxholes, but there is, and I've heard this from folks in other industries too, you get promoted because you're good at the work, not good at the leading, good at the managing. And managing is a different kind of skill set. Like I was an excellent email fundraising strategist. I think I can say that without any hesitation. It took me a while to become a good manager, like a lot of time. And I internalized a narrative that I was bad at it for quite some time, which made me feel even more like self-doubt. But management and leadership, like anything else, is a skill, is a set of tactics and a mindset that you can learn and you can get trained in, but you have to learn it and be intentional about it. And that is not a thing that politics does, in part because it's not a thing that we can fund. There's not money for this. Even though, like, we know this in the private sector, it's absolutely worth the investment. There's not money, especially donor money, for this kind of work.
I think it's choice too, because I was talking to somebody that I won't call them out, but they just spent $35,000 on one event. It was a gathering, it was a social. So I think it's a choice. If we want to, right? I see Josh laughing. I think if we want to spend time, to me, coming from a place that really, if we value our people and the work they do, then we can keep them in the ecosystem, then we can train and develop them, and we can work and provide a life, an opportunity, healthcare. I'm sure you know how many stories of people trying to get healthcare, so that probably experience kind of led this to the next book. I'll put this up here. So talk to me, as we get into leadership development, like where did this birth of the next book, the ideation, come from?
So When We're in Charge is a workbook. Not a workbook, but a book about work. And it's the leadership book and management book I needed a decade ago. Because a thing that I have found through now the nearly 10 years of leading and running teams, and through the candidates we've worked with and my colleagues and peers, is that so many of us, and I'll say us as millennials and Gen Z, are trying to do things differently and do not have a playbook for what that means. We do not have a guide. I think about this as a parent. I have 2 little kids. I am trying to parent my children differently than my parents did for me. Not because my parents did a bad or good job. I don't know, objectively I'm fine. But like, there are things that I want to do differently. I want to break the cycle on certain topics and themes. I want to create a different kind of environment for my children. In the same way, I want to create a different kind of team environment and workplace culture for my team. I want it to be a place where you can talk about your mental health with boundaries. I want it to be a place where you can be yourself, if not your full self, at the very least, your real self. I want it to be a place where you can have the time and structure and flexibility you need to have a full life and identity outside of work, even as you work hard and get things done. And thinking about how to operationalize that as an executive has been a decade-long challenge. So the book is really sort of what I have learned, how I have failed, and what I heard from the conversations I had with more than 130 leaders across a bunch of different sectors to try and give some real meat on the bones of what it means to be a leader right now.
How does that parlay into what you're working with candidates? Because I want to really dive into, which Josh and I work with candidates, the authenticity piece, because I think that really plays into how we can, once a candidate or anybody in an organization figures that out, then we can step in, and it's so much easier to get them out in the marketplace and sell them, for lack of a better word, to the voter. So let's talk about that.
So running for office is like any other leadership type role, asking someone to buy into your vision and then take action on it. In the same way that when you're running a team, you're trying to get people bought into what you want to accomplish and create the memo, do the deliverable, put together the ad, whatever it might be. It is the same theory, if not always the same exact tactics. So I think a lot about how running for office in the way that you cultivate the story of self, the way that you really do have to do like the deep introspection in order to understand what you are putting forward, the way you have to really know what you believe in order to communicate it, is the same thing you do in any other leadership position, whether you're a boss, a teacher, a faith leader. Same theory, same working concepts.
That's one of the reasons I loved the book so much is like working in marketing. I think a lot about this, not just as like I'm a Gen Z leader of a team, you know, so like I'm exactly your target market for the book. So like in one sense, it connected that way. Also, thinking about it for my clients and founders and the entrepreneurs that I work with and the campaigns, both political and general, that I'm thinking about like those, like how do you, that quote that you have that is always stuck in my head is that, here I wrote it down because I'm going to butcher it if I don't, is transparency, much like authenticity, must be used responsibly. It takes time, intentionality, and a lot of repeating yourself, but it's worth doing. I think about that a lot because it's how do you do this both in like a team setting, but also in an external setting, and how do you balance the two? Because it's really two completely different things. Like the way, and you talk about this in the book all the time, how do you want to show up on social media as an external leader, and how do you want to show up internally for your team? And I'm curious, as you're working with your candidates and you're working with your team, how do you find that balance?
So hard. But I think really it's like it's a tough line to walk, and it's something that you often don't know when you've crossed it one way or the other until you've crossed it. It's like you don't know where the boundaries are until you've exceeded them. What we really encourage folks to do, and what I encourage anyone I'm working with to think about, is like, what is the story you want people to be telling about you? Like, what is the headline you want to be? Basic media training 101. What do you want the words people to use to describe you? And then what are the things that you are doing, saying, presenting that ladder up into that? And what are the things that you are doing, saying, and presenting that might undermine that end goal? That doesn't mean necessarily that you have to stay all in the former and avoid the latter. Like sometimes it can be strategic to go against your brand, if intentionally, but you have to be doing it thoughtfully. And I think one of the lessons that I hope people take away from the book is not that I'm telling people to fake it. I'm absolutely not. I want you to be yourself. And sometimes people mistake being themselves for like making their problems other people's problems, or unloading all of their mental health shit into the workplace that is not the right container for it, or, showing up in a way that they're sort of like, oh, fuck you, I can do what I want. It's like, you can, but doing what you want has consequences. Doing what you want has consequences. Yeah. And if you're okay with those consequences, that is fine. That is a great thing to decide you're okay with. But you should know that that's what you're getting yourself into, and you should be doing it intentionally. Because I think that, especially for folks who are relatively new to the workplace or new to leadership roles, they don't have a good model for how it's done, and they don't understand how they could be shooting themselves in the foot and hurting their own end goals.
Yeah. I'm curious, and Mary, feel free to stop me if I'm jumping too far ahead. I'm curious, like the new candidates that are coming in now, like this is their first experience in politics. They're seeing the online candidates, they're seeing Mom Donnie and like people who seem really authentic online and maybe don't understand this kind of concept, right? Like, are you seeing lack of understanding of the fact that there's a certain intentional authenticity or a split authenticity when it and they just try to be their full selves, and you're like, whoa. Or
yeah. I think Mamdani is actually a really good example to sort of dissect a little bit, because he's absolutely authentic. Like, you can tell he believes what he is saying. He communicates in a way that clearly comes from the heart. Like, he's consistent across all the different places he shows up. And there are boundaries. Like, he does not really talk about his wife or his relationship. He doesn't really talk about, like, his childhood that much. It's not relevant. I mean, beyond, like, the sort of contours of his personal story. His campaign isn't even really about him. If you listen to him talk or do a spiel, he'll say, like, they voted for us. We are doing this. He mainly makes it about the voter and about New York City. He doesn't do the classic campaign thing, which is like story of self as the primary driver. He really makes it about, I know. And it's like, it's not at all about him. Not to say that it's not important, because it is, but when that is the first and only thing, it can often exist in an expense of everything else. I think that is so powerful. Like, he clearly has a sense of humor, but he's not doing like memes and bits. He's taking people very seriously. I really appreciate, I mean, AOC is another good example here. AOC is similarly very authentic, like, has what she believes, talks about the things she cares about, like models it with, backpack drives and stuff across the community, posts about makeup sometimes. We'll often do Q&As and talk about clothes and how she thinks about like the financial burden of running, but also we don't see her friends. We don't see her partner. We don't see like the books she's reading outside of a few cultivated things. She doesn't really talk about TV. Like, there are boundaries about how much of herself she is giving up for public consumption. And the thing that I want every leader to understand, whether it's in a political campaign or outside of it, is that not everyone has earned the right to your vulnerabilities and your full self. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be present and authentic. That means that you should be intentional and like thoughtful about how much of it you give away.
Yeah. I think it's really important. This conversation is so important because I see, like, my generation. Your generation, both of you, are very fluid in the boundaries of the digital space. My generation, when we entered the digital space, was, okay, make sure you scrape your social media before you apply to a job. That's what we were told because everything's out there. But being intentional, I really think, helps you build your coalitions. Because I want to talk about what your thoughts are on this. So obviously we all agreed and shaking that bio intro really centers you as the candidate and not the voter, because you're kind of missing the boat. That you are, as a candidate, you're a conduit for the vision of your community. You are the one that's helping everybody get there. And a lot of candidates kind of miss that piece. And when Josh and I are talking about positioning them, it's not about you. It's about the collective. And then when candidates go out there and they haven't really figured out, that's when I see them kind of go on social media and like, this is what I had for breakfast. So it's like, I really don't care what you had for breakfast. They're really trying to do a day in a life that feels very phony and fake.
That's right.
And then when they enter that public space and they're trying to speaking, an edgy, how do I say this? I love, they come across angry, edgy, and do you know what I mean? I think you're kind of laughing because you kind of know exactly what I'm saying is you can be true to yourself, but also know that you have to build a coalition. So talk to me more about that, what I'm getting at, because I think you can vision the candidates that I'm talking about that go a little too far. They lose the coalition, they lose the voter base, and they get turned off. And unfortunately, they've lost the how, but their intentions are sincere. And I don't want to begrudge those candidates,
I think they forget that true leadership is not about the leader, it's about the people being led. It is about the followers and the community. And I actually think influencers, the good ones, do a really good job of this. Like, if you talk to someone who makes a living online, they will say, like the content is me, but the money, the power is in the community. It's in the community moderation and the cultivation and the sense of relationship that people have to each other and the way that they are thinking about how like this reflects on their presentation of self and their sense of identity and the friendships that they make in the comments and the way in which they see themselves reflected in the DMs that I then post. Like, it's about community. That's where the money is. That's where the power is. I think that candidates who lose sight of that and who think it's about them and not about the voters miss the boat. I mean, it's why one of our first questions to every candidate is, the office you want to run for, the position, the problem you want to solve, the office that gives you power to solve it, and then the most important one, why should a voter want you to win? Which is different than why do you want to win? You want to win because winning is great and losing sucks. Voters want you to win because you're going to do something for them. They're going to feel something different in their lives. You're either going to stop harm or give them something or change something in a meaningful way. Why should a voter want you to win? What's in it for them? That's the question you have to center in your campaign.
You started doing this work day one of the first Trump
I'm very tired.
presidency, right?
And where are we?
And we're what feels like day 1 million of the second Trump presidency, right? Like, what has changed, not in our country, we don't have to get into that. What has changed in the way that campaigns run? And Mary kind of is alluding to like some of the systemic changes you've made within the organization. But what are the things that you're noticing in general for candidates, things that they need to be keeping in mind even before they're coming to you or as they're walking in the doors, or like what are the first steps that are completely different from, those
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, obviously the social media platforms have changed quite a lot. Whereas there used to be sort of one-ish public square, like Twitter was actually pretty useful for candidates and campaigns, especially for advocacy groups on the left in 2017 through 2020. It is no longer the case. It's all bots and Nazis. It's not that fun.
It's toxic.
There is not really the same kind of fundraising powerhouse anywhere else, because you can't really raise money on Instagram, TikTok. You can't really do Facebook, kind of, but it's a very different audience. It's harder. It's much harder to be able to especially get links to action. That's not to say you can't gain attention, but it's a little different than action. So the one thing that I really think any person thinking about running for office one day in the future should be thinking about is like, where are the platforms where I feel the most comfortable being myself and whatever the preferred, medium is there? Is it video? Is it text? Is it photography? Is it graphic? Whatever it is. And like go all in. Build an audience wherever it makes sense for you to be, that you can most authentically be yourself. Ideally do it on places you can own. So whether it's building an email list or website traffic, subscribers, followers, like be really mindful of that. The second thing that I think has changed quite a bit in the last 8 years is that volunteers are savvier and more experienced. There are more collectives and cohorts of people who will help you do things like design and data and build out a website for you and help you prepare, and you just have to know how to access them, but the organizations are there. I think that's a better place than we were 8 years ago, 10 years ago.
But I think what you're doing too, and other organizations are out there, are pushing the conversation away from just focusing on the federal level, right? Because we have positioned ourselves, going to the marketing, that's where all the power is. And we're learning pretty darn quickly, look at Indiana, they're going to be redistricting again, that no, policies set in the federal level, but the enactions happen on the state level. So is there a reason, I know you do focus on those, is there anything that from your experience, because you've worked on the Obama campaign and on Hillary's campaign, really zone in on why you focus on the state level and the down ballot candidates?
We only work with state house, state senate, city council, school board, library board, with the kind of 500,000 offices that exist across the United States that are not Congress and not president.
500,000.
500,000. I think for us, both practically, if you're a first-time candidate, that's where you should start. Because you don't have to quit your job. It's a thing you can do. It's affordable. It's realistic. It is absolutely meaningful. And policy-wise, the positions that we work on make a big difference in people's lives. Things like affordable housing, reproductive health care, climate, schools. A lot of these are shaped at the local level. The Republicans have done this really, really well for decades. They understand that the way you, again, to our point earlier about how do you win eventually, you start by winning the counties and the cities and the towns, and then you can flip to statewide, and then you can win electoral college votes. And you do that by building political power. You build political infrastructure. We forget this. It's like we've never read a book. It is so baffling to me, but it is also, I think, an opportunity for us because we have been doing this now for almost a decade and have built a really strong bench. And we're seeing it pay off as many of our alumni are now running for higher office. We have among the Run for Something community, 5 people running for governor, 4 running for Senate, a couple dozen running for House or statewide offices across the country, with I expect more to come in 2026. It is a beautiful, diverse, exciting bench of talent that can really transform, I think, what the Democratic Party feels like.
Absolutely. Because I think you've said, and I'm going to quote you here, the leaders that got us here will not get us where we need to go. Mm-hmm. And that is such a strong statement. I want you to lean into that a little bit more because as you just outlined, housing, rent, here in Indiana, electricity is a huge issue because they're leaning back into the coal, environment, the asthma rates going up, affecting moms, childcare. I am sitting in a childcare desert. The news deserts, everybody's getting news off of here and we're not getting information about how things impact us. So why is it so important to switch who's leading us?
Because leaders shape how people understand what the Democratic Party's brand is. They also shape what is possible. They are the party. The leaders are the party. So if we want a better Democratic Party, we need better Democratic candidates and leaders. That includes people in red states, blue states, purple states, and everything in between. Local, national, federal, school boards. This is not rocket science. It's just changing who our leaders are in order to get different outcomes. But you'd be surprised how controversial it is.
Yeah, talk to me more about that. Why, do you get a lot of pushback? Where's the pushback coming from? I mean, do you want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah.
Because we feel it here in Indiana because when you enter the room and you have a new idea, it's like, I've said this to Josh, we didn't do it that way. That's not how we won in 2008. And I was like, that's done. That's gone.
I think I have gotten, the amount of pushback has varied year to year. Depends on where we are in the particular discourse. This year, people are eager for change. They get it. They understand. And the Democratic Party, and I say that to demean members of Congress, their sort of broader staffs, the consultant ecosystem, this is how they make a living. Their jobs to work for these leaders, to operate in these campaigns, this is their livelihood. So yeah, they're pretty resistant to the idea that it's not working. And I think we are at a moment in our democracy where we cannot tiptoe around people's feelings. It's too important. All of them are eminently qualified and hireable and could do something else with their lives if they so choose. And we need to win. We need to win.
I'm curious, Amanda, I think that, and this has always been a thing, but I think we're seeing it a lot in this era of politics of just straight up candidates and presidents just straight up making things up and then just pretending like it's reality. I don't know if you're seeing this in your in the opposition for your candidates. How do you deal with that? I remember I went to a tiny private school growing up, and I had a couple friends run for school president, and a couple other people ran, and they said, hey, just so you know, Nike is going to come in and build us a whole new wing to our school, which obviously Nike's not going to do that. There were 14 kids in my class, but they lied, made it up, and they won that election, right? How do you combat straight up fiction when the fiction is more interesting than the truth?
How do you position truth? Yeah. I think it depends on what the fiction is. The thing that we do remind candidates is that especially for stuff they're going to lie about you as a person, the best inoculation is people getting to know you and trusting you and knowing that the hit against you, they call you the devil. I've met you. We had iced tea. We talked about property taxes. You're not the devil. You're a nice person that goes to my gym and is running for city council. That is a very useful grounding in reality. And making sure that you're really arming people with the talking points and the information they need to fight back on your behalf. Because you're not going to be in a lot of the spaces literal rooms, the online chat spaces, the Facebook groups, the WhatsApp groups, the Nextdoor space, like you're not going to be where these rumors are percolating. So for your friends and family and supporters who are, do they know how to combat that? Do they know what to say to about it? And do they feel like someone has their back when they do? I think that can be a really powerful thing.
One of the things that we talked about was, building that foundation, that authentic identity on social media. Building trust is a key thing, with your community. So when these kinds of things happen, so how do you start building that journey and leaning into those elements that really make a successful leader and a successful candidate?
I would really encourage folks to start to volunteer on local campaigns, if you can. Get to know the people, not just the candidate, but the people around them. Those volunteers and that staff, those are the folks that will be your number one support system when you run. Get to know the people in the back of the room with the clipboard. They're going to be the people you want at the back of your room with their clipboards too. Go to as much stuff in person as you can. A lot of it is going to be super boring. City council meetings can be a real drag. School board meetings, very boring. 80% of the work is sitting through the boring stuff until the interesting stuff happens. And also making sure that you are there and present and getting to know the folks who care, because you actually can have a lot of power simply by being in the room. I think people underestimate how much, it's like very cliche to say, like, it's most of the fight is showing up, but like literally with a lot of this, most of it is showing up, because a lot of people don't, whether because they're busy or they have other commitments or they just don't want to, or it sucks, they don't. The final thing I would say is build an audience online. Think about how you can build your platforms. The best time to grow a big audience, whatever that means for you on any of these accounts, was 2 years ago. The second best time is today. Because when you launch your campaign, you're going to be glad you have it. So, start posting about local news, start engaging in local dialogue, amplify other campaigns and candidates in the area, be present in the WhatsApp groups for your school or the app chat for whatever it is you're participating in. It is exhausting. It's exhausting. I have to do it for work, and it's exhausting. And you will never regret having that when you're ready to launch your campaign.
Yeah, that is so important, because I think, again, it's nerve-wracking because you're afraid of, what am I going to say? Am I going to offend somebody? But the more and more you do it, you get better at who you are showing up and answering questions. And I think the other thing that I'm hearing from you too is when you show up in these spaces, don't be afraid that you have to know everything.
No.
Right? That's not the job. The job is to be showing up in community, and wherever that community is, go lean into it really heavy and hard.
That's right.
Yeah.
Another question I have is another group of people who we've connected with are the nonprofits and the for-profits, who are also working in the political space, right? Whether it's raising money or just trying to make change in the community, but just not through candidacy. I'm sure you interact with those people through your work. What is your word to them on how they can best support the candidates in their space to kind of unite the two pieces together?
Don't be afraid to work for the small campaign. Go with the place where you can make the biggest impact is probably not the hot, sexy, flashy race. It's the small race with an amazing candidate. Check out Run for Something's website for any number of options. And do not try to impose what you want to win with what the voters want to win, or try to mistake them. I think that's something that a lot of people, especially if you work in politics, this is going to sound very apolitical, but actually my political values are less important than Run for Something's political values. And our political values are the voters get to decide.
Yeah. And going back to your question about spending all the money on the research, if you just go into social media and start doing some deep dive, as we call it in the marketing world, social media listening, the values and feelings of what people care about are right there.
Yep.
It's right there. Just to follow up what Josh said about the nonprofits. Now, going back to, I want to ask you this one other question because I think this is important as we're building out that pipeline and succession planning of how people get involved and elevate their profile. If they find themselves in the community and they're passionate about education or the environment, and then they go into your training and they say, you know what? It might not be for me to run for office. Is there an on-ramp for them to maybe filter into how do I start a nonprofit, or going into that ecosystem that also helps elevate all this work? Or I actually want to work on a campaign. I think that's my calling.
Yeah.
I want to be in this ecosystem, but I'm not going to run for office. Is there a space for those folks to start on their journey?
Absolutely. You could plug in with Run for Something candidates. We work with many partners who train staff. There's a really strong ecosystem. It's hard because not every candidate can pay people what they need, but especially if you're willing to start as like a volunteer or like do this part-time outside of your day job, there's absolutely ways to plug in and do more than just running. You can really make a big difference in these campaigns.